Tribal or regional.
All right, welcome back and thank you for staying with us. It's now time for the national dailies to be stories on those dailies to actually be reeled out, the front pages of the newspapers and also reviewed. Let's take a look at Daily Trust newspaper. We have a lead story here that says, "I am not on the run, Malami." Sirika denies invitation from EFCC. 8 Buhari's ex-ministers under probe, says EFCC source. And we also have ex-president's corruption war, a one-man show, says Dunn. You can find details of that story on page 4 of Daily Trust newspaper. And below that story is a pictorial, one dead as looters trapped under rubble of demolished Kano Hotel. Now we also have more stories. On the footnotes there, Tinubu to governors. No reason to complain. Man who faked own kidnap loses 365,000 naira ransom to thieves. Now we also have first Muslim woman confirmed as U.S. federal judge. Details can be found on page 32. At the top of the page there we have no innocent herder killed in Nasarawa airstrike, says NAF. Nigeria's debt profile to hit 81 trillion naira following forex rates unification. And finally, subsidy removal, NEC mulls 747 billion naira palliatives. These are some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, let's move to the Nigerian Tribune. Today, from the top of the newspaper there, it says, reps reject motion to stop Jagba syndrome. Motion is breach of 1999, I beg your pardon, Constitution. You find this on page 12 of the newspaper. INEC tenders Tinubu's biodata form. Beavers reports for 36 states, including the FCT. As Yakubu sends representatives to present 4 out of 11 documents listed in subpoena. OBLP tender over 18,000 blurred polling units results in evidence. Now all this you find on page 29. The major story that says, poor economy, we asked for tough job, we can't complain, Tinubu tells governors. NEC moves to provide palliatives for workers and vulnerable groups. And the second rider there says, federal government to seek World Bank funds to implement CNG. Now this story you'll find on page 3. Rising food prices push inflation rate to 22.4%, according to NBS. YIGP sealed 17 LG secretariats in Plateau. Governors call for calm. Alleged sale of government property. ICPC arraigns Ojerinde son's daughter-in-law in fresh suit. Over 150 anti-graft CSOs celebrate Bawa's suspension and call for a thorough investigation over allegation. Okay, you find this interesting story on page 26. And there's a pictorial of, some of the people, the appointments that the president made. Tinubu appoints Ribadu, Alake, Edun, Adedechi, 4 others as special advisors. Now, these are some of the stories in the Tribune today.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. We have from the top of the page there, Naira weakens to 702 Naira per dollar. CBN fresh forex supply likely. Now, Tinubu economic advisors propose customs NIMASA FIRS merger. Full subsidy, NEC mall 702 billion Naira as workers' allowance. We also have the lead story here that talks about APC bigwigs jostle for ministerial slots. Tinubu names 8 special assistants. We also have party chieftains, Favor Keyamo, Omo Agege, Fayemi Adeyeye, Ganduje, Marafa, others. Edun appointed SA on monetary affairs. Alake gets communication. Ribadu handles security. And you can find a pictorial of some of the appointees. We also have EFCC summons Sirika, quizzes Nigeria air officials. Probe begins as OAU student dies of suspected suicide. And we also have on boat tragedy, federal government vows prosecution of operators. These are some of the stories on the Punch newspaper.
All right, let's move to the Nation newspaper today. From the top there, it says Ribadu Edun Uwajumogu Alake among 8 presidential advisors. OB LP tender 18,088 blood result sheet. Rising basic cost of living push inflation to 22.41%. The top story there says workers to receive cost of living petrol allowances, and federal government states propose palliatives to cushion effect of petrol subsidy withdrawal. You'll find, of course, this major story on page 4. Abdusalami Akande Yaka say Tinubu on track and president's decision bold, says Sunusi. And there's a pictorial of Governor Sawa-Olu, Buratai, and others who pay tribute to Abibatu Mogaji. You find this on page 6. Ozehome Ejiofo, we remain Kanu's lawyers. Reps get 7 ad hoc committees. Naira closes at 702 Naira, that's per dollar, at INE window. And kidnap suspects kill farmer. Now, these are some of the stories in the Nation today.
All right, up next is Blueprint newspaper. Now let's take a look at what it says. We have the lead stories on fuel subsidy removal. Says Tinubu upbit as NEC mauls 702 billion naira palliatives for civil servants. We have riders that says PMS consumption dropped from 67 million to 40 million liters per day, says council. Let's take Nigeria from potential nation to rapid economy, says Tinubu. 6 governors support. Names Alake, Ribadu, Edun special advisors. Details can be found on page 15. Now we also have more stories at the top of the page there. 13 jostle for NGE positions at Owerri Biennial Convention. Ex-JAM Registrar Ojerinde sons arraigned for selling federal government's property in Ghana. Now, below the lead story is a pictorial of Vice President Kashim Shettima and members of the National Economic Council shortly after the inaugural meeting held at the council chambers of the presidential villa in Abuja on Thursday. $6 trillion wasted annually on subsidies globally, says World Bank. NHRC to set up National Hate Speech Register. We also have Nigeria's inflation rates moves to 22.41% in May. On the footnotes there, we have troops neutralize 58 terrorists, arrests 40 logistics suppliers. And these are some of the stories on Blueprint this morning.
All right, we'll move to this day newspaper this morning. Major story there says Tinubu lists 8 priority areas of development, 6 the governor supports. NEC proposes palliatives for workers, vulnerable group over subsidy. Mauls payment of 702 billion naira to civil servants as cost of living allowance. Federal government seeks World Bank funds to implement CNG. President appoints Ribadu Edun Alake, 5 others special advisors. Meet with Abdusalami Sanusi Akande at State House. An ex-head of state pleads for people's understanding over subsidy removal. At the top of the newspaper there says Goldman Sachs Naira devaluation not sufficient condition for exchange rate unification, wants clarity on FX restrictions. Now this story you'll find on page 5 of the newspaper. It comes with a lot of riders there. Tinubu meets advisors. You find this on page 34. Below the mask there it says Abdul Karim Chukwu takes over as acting chairman of EFCC, and oil marketers demand full payment for outstanding petrol equalization arrears. And there's a pictorial, of course, of the inauguration of the National Economic Council. And these are some of the stories on this day today.
All right, let's take a look at Daily Independence. The lead story here says Tinubu to governors. Nigerians are awaiting economic reforms to escape poverty. Says we begged to be elected, we must deliver results. Appoints Edun Alake Ribadu others special advisors, and we also have away from that story, NSIB B's report indicts Max Air of overwriting CVR after Abuja serious incidents. Now, we also have federal government mulls mass production of CNG-powered vehicles to mitigate impact of fuel subsidy removal. Federal government directs states to submit reports on flood-prone areas in 1 week. And we also have more stories. At the top of the nameplates there, we have over 65% of Nigerian men aged 40 at risk of erectile dysfunction, says experts. And these are some of the stories on Daily Independent.
All right, we'll move to the leadership today. The top story there says, reforms, you must step on toes, CSO's lawyers tell Tinubu. Riders there says, want ministers unveiled. No excuse for failure, president declares. Says, we begged, campaigned, danced for the job. Meet Siakase, Akande, and Sanusi. You find all this on page 4. There's a pictorial, of course, of Governor Sanwo-Olu. Beside the picture, it says, Reps, Wiki floors Atiku as Chinda emerges minority leader. Below the newspaper, it says IBB tax NAS leadership on inclusive government. Inflation rises for 5 straight months to 22.41%. And there's a pictorial of the new appointees of the president as the special advisors. Now, these are some of the stories in leadership today.
All right, well, with that, we have come to the end of reading out some of these stories, and we would move on to the analysis of some of these stories. We already have our guest, our Friday guest in the studio, talking about Nuruddin Abdullah. He's the editor of 21st Century Chronicles. Good morning, sir, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. All right, so let's begin with the lead story on Daily Trust. Now, I was just telling Samaya before we started the newspaper review about how there are lots of suspensions, going on, and people seem to think or seem to have a list of other people that need to be suspended as well. And right now, we actually have the lead story talking about Malami saying he's not on the run, but where is he? And we're having stories of the Sirika denying invitation from EFCC and the rest. Now, are we seeing a repeat of what happened in the previous administration when they came to power, where there were lots of suspensions and DSS invitations and interrogations?
Yes, and the situation now, I think, is even more important. The need for this invite is even more expedient than before. Because if you look at even the Jonathan's regime, administration, the era was the Obasanjo's. When they held sway as Nigerian presidents, they have an internal mechanism of sanctioning elected, not elected, appointed officials. You remember Eradua sacked some ministers over spending unspent funds. Same thing with Obasanjo. Even Jonathan, he sacked Odua, for instance. But in the last 8 years of President Buhari, there was not such. He allowed his officials to have a smooth sail, whatever their infractions, minus Babachir. I think any official was sacked by Buhari in the last 8 years for apparent infraction, particularly when it comes to tampering with their schedule responsibilities. So that makes it more expedient for all these officials who Nigerians believe have violated their order of office by either self-aggrandizement or apparent distortion of the public service rules. Take the last guy, Sirika. You know what happened during his last day in office? Mm-hmm. Spending, according to him, about 5 billion in renting an aircraft just for a mock show of the Nigerian year. He spent those funds on consultants and staff salaries and whatever, as you said. Nigerians need explanation because that's many of us believe that's an assault on our psyche. So coming to this, why is Malemi talking? Buhari had about 40-something ministers. Why is it only Sirika? Why is it only Malemi? So that is the situation. The way Buhari handled his ministers, his top aides, his head of agencies, made it expedient, necessary for the current administration, irrespective of who takes over from him. President Tinubu is APC, irrespective of who takes over from him. Even if it is Yusuf, his son, there are some Buhari's aides that must be brought to book. We need them to come back and explain how they got their wealth, brazen abuse of office that newspapers reported, editorials written, but he looked the other way. So what we are going to see now, we'll say the Dizani scandal was nothing compared to what we are going to see. You understand? So, and on the other hand, the suspension and sack is normal. Take the CBN governor, for instance. For the first time in Nigerian political history, our Chancellor of the Exchequer left his responsibility of managing the economy and wanted to join a political party, bought form, wanted to even contest as president without abdicating his office. When civil society and what a few roles, he had the audacity to go to court. Yes, he went to a federal high court in Abuja, saying that he has that right for the court to confirm his fundamental right as a Nigerian and sitting CBN governor to vie for a political office. What did the president, his appoint? He looked the other way. He claimed nothing was happening until God saved the situation. And what a few. So it is not any surprising that Emefiele was suspended. Even the EFCC guys, EFCC has done well, but it looks more like a Yahoo in prosecution agency. There are apparent cases in the country. Only 38 people have immunity from investigation and prosecution based on the Constitution. The president, vice president, 36 governors, maybe, and their deputies. You can call any minister anytime. But what Buhari did, for good 8 years, he looked the other way. You can do whatever you want. So it is not surprising what is happening. More will come. More people will be handed into custody. Now, we are now back into the regime of whistleblowing.
Okay, so based on, what Hussein has said earlier, she said it was like when Buhari came into power at the beginning, we saw people running, like people were scared. Because he came with, his main mandate was all about, security was one, and then corruption, to get rid of corruption. And at the beginning, it seemed like though he was going to do that work, but then he failed on that part. So now that there is President Tinubu starting with this, some people, Nigerians, are having doubts that it could be just, a beginning, and people are not sure it's going to last long, and perhaps it's a witch hunt rather, just, to show people that he's doing something, but it might not go for a long run, because Nigerians have seen situations where a lot of things are started, but they don't, there's no consistency. What's your take on that?
No, I think that we are dealing with two different scenarios now. Let's be specific. Buhari came May 29. A week later, he appointed 3 aides. SGF, that's Babachir, NSA, that's Monguno, and Additional, if I remember correctly. During the same period, comparatively, Tinubu appointed how many heads? 10. Chief of Staff, remember? Minus even his ADC, SGF, and now 8 special advisors. The Senate approved 20 for him. They approved, Buhari applied for 8, the Senate, Saraki Senate approved 15. But until in 8 years, when after editorials, CSOs, and what have you, he grudgingly appointed special advisor on economic matters and deployed him to the deputy vice president's office in the last days or months of his office. Tinubu made about 19, according to former Senate President Ahmad Law, 19 bills waiting for assent. Buhari abandoned them there. Buhari never believed in subsidy, but he allowed it to fester, guzzle billions, trillions rather. When Tinubu came, what did he do? It's a painful thing that we need to do. And he did it, and we are going to look at it again. Unification of the exchange rate regimes. That has been a cesspool for the Buhari administration that plagued the entire country. That is why Emefiele is in custody now. More people will be invited. Foreign exchange regime alone, 460 is given, 500 is given to Samaya. Somebody will just call you, send an account, and you'll be given the balance. Tinubu said no to that, and he refined it. From 750 yesterday at the I&E windows, it closes about 702. You just mentioned it. Take Emirates Airline, for instance, now. About their $800 million is stopped. Now they will come and close. That's why they close their operation in Nigeria. And so many airlines, because they cannot repatriate their funds. It was a cesspool of corruption. Political aides, family members, they will just write names from the villa, send them to Emefiele, and you'll be crediting the account without doing nothing. That's why you see people riding luxury cars in Abuja, buying plazas. They don't have a place of work, they don't have a pure water factory or nothing. But you can't compare the first days. Buhari, yes, we judge him by his antecedents, and we were wrong. Is it not Mansugudu, body language stuff? It was all scam, unfortunately. And the baseline here is to look at their individual competence.
All right, now let's take a look at another story here about the president telling governors that they have no reason to complain. Nigerians actually elected them to do their job, so they must do their job. Now we know how, let's say united, these governors are, and how the former president actually, turned his face, to what they were doing. Do you think that this particular president, that Tinubu, would be able to clip the wings of these governors?
Definitely, because for so many obvious reasons, their competence. Take Buhari, Jonathan, Eradu, and Obasanjo. Look at how Obasanjo dealt with them. Yeah, Eradu was neither here nor there because, he was just 2 years and he was sick and what have you. Jonathan was naive, so they underrated the man, they did all what they could and what have you. Buhari came and it was worst. Majority of them couldn't pay salaries, not to talk of pension and gratuity, and what have you. Paris fund reform was initiated, which is now a subject of EFCC investigation because of all manner of corruptions, allegations, claims. Partnering, what do they call it? Under Kemi Adeosun as Minister of Finance, there are so many layers of funds channeled to the state governors to pay up salary and what have you, with conditions. there is a particular state in the North Central, I remember. The former governor lost the election because he applied for 50 billion. He was not giving his kogi. Immediately, the new governor came here, Abel came, 50 billion was channeled to him. As I'm talking to you, he's still owing salary. Not top gratuity, what if you. They are paying salary in pro rata. You are receiving 15,000, now you get 7 or 3, and what if you. So that was it. And instead of the president to firm off his stance, he looked the other way. I don't think Tinubu will tolerate that. He was a former governor, like you. I don't think he will tolerate that. And I don't think even the governors will behave towards him the way they did to Buhari. There are things he will take, there are things that he will never take. Individual differences, there are nuances, and look at even the quality of appointment he did. Look at the schedules of the new appointees. It means that this man means business. He knows what he's doing. The student loan act has been lying there. The president refused to assent to it.
But is that a way that President Tinubu can, keep these governors in check without, say, we know that, of course, he has this charisma where you look at him and you know not to misbehave, but then is there any constitutional way that he can actually put them in check on what to do and how to do it?
There are so many ways. They have their schedule and functions, and yes, you understand? There is point of convergence. Take Jonathan, for instance. When Nigeria was getting so much money, he said, okay, the escrow account, you remember, the sovereign wealth fund, it is the same governors that went to court, Fashola in particular. Amechi was then chairman of the governors forum. They took Jonathan to court. But when Buhari came, he said that he made an empty treasury. Fashola was his minister. Amechi was his minister. Jonathan was saying, was it not you guys that took me to court when I said, let's save this money for rainy days? That's just one instance. There are so many ways. I'm not saying that the president should be unconstitutional in the way he does his things, like Obasanjo did. Obasanjo sacked a Plateau governor. For whatever reason, you may say it's politically motivated. But look at the crisis in Plateau at that time. He was so enraged that Plateau was boiling. The governor was here in National Stadium watching football games. There are certain things that cannot be allowed to happen, for instance. So he will appoint his aides. As a governor of a state, you know your limits. Go and do your function. Or like Buhari did, majority of the governors are always in Abuja. They're either visiting his wife, visiting his chief of staff, or visiting his other aides.
Which is actually something that, a lot of people feel needs to be tamed. The fact that, you were elected a position, for example, governor, you need to stay in your state and work rather than living in the state capital. Exactly. So, but, after that, just before we leave, let's have your thoughts on the newly appointed special advisors.
Like I said earlier, minus one of them. Maybe I don't need to want to be mentioned.
I was about to say, just mention the name.
Maybe minus one of them, majority, all of them. Look at their CV. CV-wise, their antecedents and their new schedule. You know that they are square pegs and square holes, right? If you look at it. I think minus Darazo. Yeah, Darazo. Darazo has been Buhari's media system for decades, for more than 10, 15 years before Buhari even came to power. So he became a special advisor on special duties. But now, his role, I think, is politics. He's not a politician. That's a fact. And he doesn't have the temperament to be engaged with politicians. We work with him, we know him, right from Jabirot, Buhari's office, when Buhari was campaigning to be president for those 12 years. I mean, when he was here, you understand? And intergovernmental affairs. So is he the one to be dealing with the National Assembly or state governors and what have you? Maybe, and yesterday I was discussing with a friend. He said, but it's politics now. Is he more politician than Tinubu? You know, there are certain positions, politics is generic. Just, he's, but truth is, among the Buhari's inner circle, he was the only one that stood out and supported Tinubu from day one. So Tinubu rewarded loyalty. And that's why he gave him politics. And politics is an all-commerce affair. It is not monetary policy, it is not health, it is not revenue, it is not communications and whatever. And if you take Chief Alaki, for instance, many of us that know him know that he's the brain box of the president, right from 1999. He has all it takes. But my only hope, my only prayers is that there won't be conflicts, particularly with Chief Alaki that we know, and maybe the Chief of Staff Office. Yes. Because special duties, communications, and strategy. Even the 8 years Tinubu governed Lagos, he was information and strategy. He's an information expert, communication expert, as well as politician. He's a master strategist when it comes to, even during the campaign, after the election, even during the inauguration, you know who is actually the brand box behind the president. So generally speaking, I think minus all the other guys, you know, is it Wale Dunda you talk of? Or is it that revenue guy? Or is it that energy lady? CV-wise, they are antecedent, they are some of the best we have. And we hope that even the ministers will not just be on quota system. That Sumaya must be brought because he's from the FCT, or Dashe must be brought because from, no. Look at their CV. Yes, APC, bring candidate, but please don't bring like the people Buhari brought. People who are in their retirement. He dusted them up and brought them to Villa, and they have been sleeping.
Yeah, there are lots of young people in this.
No, exactly. No, I'm not going to that way, young, no. Yeah, Bello is young, right?
Right.
Are the young Nigerians proud of him? No. Young and competent people.
In addition to, you know, their competent.
Look at that, the energy advisor, for instance. Look at that guy. Look at Eduna and what have you. Nigerians will be proud of them.
Well,
they are young and competent, please.
We have to actually wrap up now. Thank you so much, Nuruddin Abdullah,
My
for
pleasure.
joining us on the analysis of the newspapers. And with that, we'll take a break. And when we come back at the top of the hour, the show continues.